protecting the police every single day.
Court tells Florida town that law forbidding residents fuck Trump sign is unconstitutional. Free speech. From the Fuck Your Constitutional Violations Department. Friday, November 4, 2022, 12:48 p.m., Tim Cushing. Welcome to America. Fuck everything. And not in the sexual sense, as any person would immediately understand unless, of course, they just want to hit people with criminal charges for maximizing the use of limited space to criticize the government. Local governments tend to get pretty weird about community standards and protecting children, something that can possibly be chalked up to thinking locally rather than recognizing the baseline set by the U.S. Constitution and its amendments, particularly the first of those amendments. We've seen dubious actions catering to each side of the political aisle. In Texas, cops decided to seize a sign critical of the Republican Party from a person's yard under the theory the picture might offend children. That it depicted the Republican elephant slipping its trunk under the skirt of a child in response to allegations against GOP Senate candidate Roy Moore for taking sexual liberties with minors went unmentioned in the city's response. On the other side, a New Jersey municipal judge decided the First Amendment didn't protect a homeowner who placed anti-Joe Biden signs and flags in her yard, including the ever-popular phrase "fuck Biden." The local judge arrived at this conclusion by ignoring the obvious definition of the phrase to suggest it had something to do with actually engaging in sexual congress with the sitting president, which of course might be tough to explain to children. Fortunately, the First Amendment is getting more respect in, of all places, Punta Gorda, Florida. As reported by Eugene Volokh, a judge recently declared the city's obscenity law the one that led to criminal citations for "fuck Trump," "fuck policing for profit," and "fuck Biden" signs and flags displayed by resident Andrew Sheets unconstitutional. For these so-called crimes, Sheets was fined $2,500. He sued. And he has won. The opening of the Florida Circuit Court opinion PDF makes it clear the city, seemingly deliberately, misread the law to target protected expression. That the intention of the law is to protect children makes no difference. The city of Punta Gorda has embarked upon the task of protecting children. The record makes clear that city adopted the ordinance in hopes of advancing that goal. Punta Gorda argues that the ordinance is limited as it only applies to signs in public places which can be seen by children. In actual fact, that is no limitation at all. As is relevant to this case, the ordinance bans signs that depict or describe sexual activities or organs. Fuck or cunt can be about sex or not about sex. Sheets used fuck as an interjection. By its express terms, the ordinance does not apply to the use of fuck as an interjection. Sheets' items used fuck to emphasize the passion and force of his political opinion, and his use of the word had nothing to do with sex. The use of "our cunts" is arguably within the express terms of the ordinance, but is similarly used as a political statement, not a reference to the sexual organ. By applying the rules of constitutional avoidance, by its plain terms, the ordinance does not apply to Sheets' items as they have nothing to do with sexual activities or organs. The court cites a couple of extremely relevant bits of Supreme Court precedent, the latter of which has received plenty of coverage here at TECHDIRT. Although factually different in some respects, this case is squarely within the reasoning of Cohen v. California, fuck the draft jacket case, and the distinction between a criminal charge and a civil fine provides no basis to uphold the ordinance in this case. Given the most recent cases involving First Amendment challenges, Monoy, fuck school, fuck cheerleading case, and, Reed, municipal sign case, there can be little question that the U.S. Supreme Court jurisprudence has moved toward more protection for speech, not less. The city, on the other hand, offered very little in terms of Supreme Court precedent in defense of its ordinance and its actions. Instead, it offered perhaps the weakest for the children argument possible. In this case, Punta Gorda argues only one compelling governmental interest: protection of children, specifically, only children that can read. That there are limited beneficiaries isn't enough to make an attempt at speech regulation narrowly tailored. The court says the law is wrong in both directions. The ordinance is under-inclusive and over-inclusive. The ordinance prohibits speech that the record reflects was never seen by children. PUNTA GORDA claims that the limitation to places where children under May 17 see the signs is a narrow limitation. It is not. Children may be present anywhere in PUNTA GORDA and therefore that term is no limitation at all. The ordinance does not prohibit use of verbal indecency, and that is a means of communication that many more children could understand. The PUNTA GORDA ordinance is overbroad as it was actually designed to cause the preemptive self-silencing of speakers whose messages are entitled to constitutional protection. See, Reno VACLU, 521 U.S. 844, 1997. Whether termed vague or overbroad, the ordinance fails for the same reasons as the statute in Reno. Good try, says the court, but the PUNTA GORDA ordinance has to go. In sum, PUNTA GORDA's municipal heart is in the right place, but there does not appear to be a constitutionally valid way to protect children from seeing, or displaying, political signs with the word. That's how the Constitution works. The way PUNTA GORDA imagined it works solely for the purpose of shutting down a critic of all things government, and one imagines it was probably the criticized police that objected most, given sheets directed fucks at both Biden and Trump, is no longer an option for the city. And there's even better news, PUNTA GORDA is not going to waste any more of its residents' money to argue against their interests. The city will not be appealing this decision. There are a few city officials who still believe this decision, and the decades of court precedent at all levels backing it, is wrong, but have decided it's not worth an unknown amount of future expense to continue trying to punish one person for speech some city officials objected to.
Nicole Christian, Port Charlotte. How many citations were given out for sign ordinance violations since certain language was codified as forbidden? Do any of you know?
This is not Q&A.
It's not Q&A. All right. I wonder how many people were jailed as a result of it. On July 27, 2021, the board was advised via email about the necessity of respecting and protecting Americans' right to protest and free speech. What changed your minds to jail people after that? For signs, for political expression in a public forum. I wonder how many on the board have never used the F-bomb in their lives. I know last year one of your members admitted to using it in golf, a game. Why is it okay to use it to play golf, but it's not okay to use it when you're expressing deeply held political beliefs? I wonder why we're forbidding the use of words when the next step would be to use weapons of war. If you can't have a civil discourse, as Thomas Jefferson warned us, if truth is not able to be combated in the public forum, then it leads people to violence. I want to go on record as saying that I think it's a crime to limit the number of political signs that Punta Gorda Americans can put in their own yards to support candidates that they believe in. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is James McLinnis, and I'm here to speak about the sign ordinance, of course. I personally, and millions of other people just like me, consider the First Amendment and the United States Constitution to be the most important thing that separates our country from everybody else. Putin's locking people up right now for protesting the war. He's got a big disinformation campaign. If you try and tell the truth, you get put in jail. And a lot of people look at that and they say, that's terrible, but this city council is doing the exact same thing. You're not like the Wizard of Oz, you're not little Lilliputians, you're little Putins. You have to understand that one of the things that makes this country great is the ability to say what we want to say, when we want to say it, any way we want to say it. And people like you do not have the right to tell us we can't. The Constitution guarantees that. And you worry about you wonder how you got into this big mess. This big mess started several years ago when people started protesting your police that were overly abusive and heavy-handed in what they were doing, and in a lot of ways very corrupt. And people started monitoring that, following that, videotaping them, and seeking public records. When they came to seek public records, you guys all played this Title 10, Chapter 119, violate their rights by making them pay exorbitant fees for every single record. Every single thing needed to be redacted when it didn't. You withheld records intentionally from these people requesting records. And then, in order for them to enforce the law, Title 10, Chapter 119, they have to sue you. But in order to sue you, they have to prove that you did not give them the records they asked for. And to do that, they needed to videotape asking for the records. So what did you do then? You made it a crime to videotape inside public building. You told people coming to pick up the records that you can't videotape you asking for the records, which is a violation of Title 10, Chapter 119. It's a crime. You can't put a condition on the release of public records, and you did that. And when that wasn't enough, these people got angry and they went out and started protesting. You created the Ian McGuires and the Andrew Sheets of the world by trying to suppress people's rights. And every time you try and do that, it's going to get worse and worse and worse for you. You are going to be sued many more times than this. You're going to cost all these people hundreds of thousands of dollars by your own arrogance. And your attorney, Levine, he sat before you in these meetings and he lied to you, and he told you that Cohen versus California supported it when any idiot could see that that lawsuit was about what you can say on the radio, not what you can say on a public sidewalk. He led you down that dark path because that's what you wanted to hear. The first thing that you should do to straighten out this mess is fire him, because he lied to you. And then after he lied to you, he told you he could support this in court. And then he took all the taxpayers' money to go fight it. And now you're where you are today, and he's still supporting it. You've gotten bad advice from a bad attorney, and you need to do something about that. But the bottom line is, the more you try and squeeze First Amendment, the more it's going to blow up in your face. You don't realize that yet, but what I want to just say, last closing argument, to all of you, and especially to you, Mr. Karski, the I won't back down, fuck you.
Anybody else? Yep. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to address council before we move on? Last call. If you've spoken once, you cannot speak a second time. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Okay. Excuse me, you're out of order, sir. You're out of order.
You're corrupt and you will be sued multiple times.
Yep. We will address it. Okay, we do have a couple of folks in the audience that have submitted their names for board or committees. If you'd like to come forward and introduce yourself, please come to the...
Morning, my name is Dave Kalin, here to speak on item 8D, which references the sign ordinance. I'd like to start by thanking you for giving the time to speak. Many of you, as elected officials, have taken the oath of office, which is to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That is the first role of government, is to protect the people under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. When we look at the sign ordinance and what it has created over the past duration of its enactment, has been just nothing short of shameful. As we move forward, I would encourage each one of you to consider this very carefully, because just 54 short years ago, a black Baptist pastor was assassinated for his political views and free speech. Speech that is now accepted and cherished in our heritage as Americans and African Americans, that we are all equal. Wasn't so just 60 years ago. So I would encourage every one of you to seriously consider, as you move forward with this sign ordinance and what it has done to our community, the divisiveness of it, and let's work to pull ourselves together and not divide. Thank you.
Thank you. podium, state your name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Michael Hirsch. I live in Seminole Lakes. I'm here to talk about your essentially repeal of the egregious unconstitutional sign ordinance. It's little comfort to stand here and say, I told you so. I'm really here to say, now what are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Most of you voted and passed a sign ordinance that was blatantly unconstitutional. You should have known it. The only supporting document I could have brought with me is the Bill of Rights, and that could be displayed up there too. You should have known it, your city manager certainly should have known it, and I'm sure your city attorney knew it. The problem was nobody stood up and said to the council members, you can't do this, it's unconstitutional. So what you essentially did is passed an ordinance that has cost me and everybody else in this room probably upwards of $150,000 to maybe $200,000, maybe more. We need an accounting of what it's cost in not only out-of-pocket costs for attorneys, court fees, police overtime, and enforcing this egregious act. I've been a journalist all my life. I've been in radio and television the past 20-some years as an author. My livelihood depends on the First Amendment. You people didn't just bump it. You ran it over, backed up and ran it over again. It was a Kyle Schwarber 492-foot out of the park, no doubter. The question is, what are you going to do to keep from doing that again? I need you to say that you will empower your city attorney not to be in fear for his job, same for your city manager, but to stand up in public at a city council meeting and say, don't do that. It will cost the citizens of this city a lot of money. It's blatantly unconstitutional. It will embarrass Punta Gorda nationwide. You can't just sit there and vote for it and ho-hum and walk around and say, well, we had to do it because people were asking us to do it. Mr. Levin and our city manager, you need to stand up and say, don't do that. And the city council needs to empower them to do that and know that they won't be held in fear of their jobs if they actually do that. The First Amendment is just about as important, more important than anything we could possibly be dealing with. You need to respect it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Hi. I'd like to say...
Your name, please.
Oh, my name is Jeff Lustig, and I'd like to thank Mr. Cummings' service on the City Council. He's always been accessible. The work that he did to push forward the codes for the building codes and to make us into the 21st century was really very helpful, and it's not unnoticed. He was always available to talk to and to discuss things. On another note, I worked for 40 years in New York City, and there was a thing called the Small Claims Court that you, as a small business owner, was terrified to go into. You knew you were always going to lose when you went up there. But it allowed people to have the redress so that they feel that they were being taken care of. It made the business owner more amenable to settling any kind of conflicts. The reason why I say that is it's the difference between theory and reality. In theory, I'm correct that the person didn't have a right to this merchandise or whatever, but in reality, you were going to lose and you're going to have to pay this money. The same is true with some of our ordinances, and what I'm concerned about is the ordinance of 15-48E, the recording of city workers. The recording is dependent on the city employee if he wants to or not to be recorded, and therefore if the employee feels good about the recording or that he's on the side of the individual who's making the recording, he will allow that for public view, but if he's not, he won't allow that, and therefore you won't have the same time, place, and manner problems that you had with the other ordinance. The other thing is that there's a disconnect between patrol officers' body cams and Marcy's law, and you need to address the police can't delete those kinds of images or redact those, it's part of the city council or the people who work in the government to do that. And so you need to look at how you can get those two things in order so that people's informations are protected and public. And again, thank you very much, and thank you for repealing the Section Z on that ordinance. That was very important to me, and I hope that we can avoid frivolous lawsuits in the future by being proactive and have the city attorney look at these things to see what potentially we could be sued for. Whoever thought that Roe v. Wade would be overturned, whoever thought that affirmative action was going to be overturned. It requires us to look at all of our ordinances again to see what our liability is. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, my name is Louis LaBarbera, and to speak on the unconstitutional sign ordinance, how are we going to keep that from happening again, and what are we going to do for the people that were negatively impacted? For example, Andrew Sheets, who was fined up to $5,000 due to this unconstitutional ordinance, and a lien was put onto his house. He lost business, and his name was defamed multiple times. What are we going to do to keep that from happening again? It has been brought to multiple people's attention that was blatantly unconstitutional, whether it's to the council, to the police, and nobody did anything about it until Andrew Sheets took it to court. We had plenty of case law, for example, Cohen v. California, when it was said that one man's lyric is a, no, one man's curse words is another man's lyric. Thank you. It's free speech. That's my supporting document will be the Constitution of the United States of America, the First Amendment, freedom of speech. What is in that ordinance had nothing to do with fighting words. It had nothing to do with inciting violence. It was blatantly unconstitutional freedom of speech. What are you going to do to keep it from happening again? That's what the people need to know. Because remember, you all took an oath and the police took an oath to serve the people. You need to let the people know how you're going to keep this unconstitutionalities from happening again to where it affects the people, especially someone like Andrew Sheets. He won his state trial, and his federal case is about to be settled. And he was even arrested for free speech on public property. How are you going to keep that from happening again?
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to address council? Please come to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. And please line up and get